God'll get you for that one.
Maude is owned by Shout Factory.
God'll Get You for That, Walter is produced for entertainment purposes only.
Sponsored in part by Findley's Friendly Appliances. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of God'll Get You for That, Walter.
And he actually does get someone.
He does get someone, not Walter, but
he does
get someone.
He does get someone. It was nice, nice for him to get someone after such a long
time,
long spell of not getting anyone.
Of not getting anyone.
Yes.
And welcome to God'll Get You for That, Walter, a podcast where we discuss the 1970s hit sitcom Maude. We are your hosts. I am Tom Catt, and who are you?
I am Toni Homeperm.
And welcome! Today, we are at episode 65. Look at us go.
Look at us.
And we're discussing Season 3, Episode 17, And Then There Were None.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by Hal Cooper, aired January 27th, 1975. And we want to also add that last week's episode, which we did not say the air date for, was January 20th, 1975. Mm-hmm. That was when we came back from the December break.
Yes. We never actually mentioned that we're now in 75.
Yes, we are now in 75.
Lost that over.
It was just sort of it was in passing.
I know.
It was definitely in passing.
Now let me ask, the name of this episode, And Then There Were None. Now that's a very famous Agatha Christie.
Yes, it is.
Murder mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out
where the connection was.
What the connection is.
I mean, I think it has something to do with the fact that there were no more occupants in the house. Philip was out.
Oh, right. Oh,
Walter
okay,
was
because
out.
at one point, Maude is all alone in the house.
All alone by herself.
Oh, okay. Now I get it. Sometimes I'm blonde.
And sometimes I'm bald.
Well, yes. Who knows?
Yes. This episode was directed by Hal Cooper, written by Norman Lear and Charlie Hawk. And there were two guest stars, Audra Lindley, who played Marilyn Loftus, and Don Chastain, who played Harold Loftus.
Yes, and of course,
Audra Lindley famously played
Mrs. Roper
in Three's Company,
and the very short-lived The Ropers series.
Yes, The Ropers series. I wish that had more. I wish it had more.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, who doesn't love a witty wife in caftans?
I know. I mean...
She's a drag queen from the get-go.
Really? Everybody loved the Ropers.
Everyone loved the Ropers.
But they never should have spun them off. It was like they worked
with the cast.
With the cast. When they tried to have them on their own, it just,
And before we begin this episode, we want to wish a very happy 100th birthday to Norman Lear.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
It was just his 100th birthday.
That's right.
This past weekend, actually.
Yeah.
Either this past week or this past week, he turned...
Last week.
He turned 100.
Last week, yeah.
And it's so funny. Him, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, and I'm trying to think, who was there was another picture of him with a group of older Hollywood stars, and I can't remember the other one's name. It was Norman Lear, Carl Reiner, Rob Reiner's father.
Right.
Mel Brooks, and there was one other person whose name escapes me. I'm sure I'll find the picture and be able to look at it.
Then you'll remember, yes.
And then I'll remember. But yes, also sad to report, Nichelle Nichols has passed away.
Yes,
Pat Carroll passed away. That one hit me real hard.
I know, because you always did Ursula.
I still do.
Yeah.
I still do.
Yeah.
And to those interested, I have a vocal match for Pat Carroll.
Yes.
Little morbid humor there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's definitely been an interesting week for both of us. So,
yes.
With that said, the episode opens with Mrs. Naugatuck humming and
she's doing
singing sweetly. She's doing la la la.
She's buttering
toast. While buttering Walter's toast.
Walter is drinking his OJ.
Yes, drinking his OJ and waiting for his breakfast because, man.
Mm-hmm.
And, he says, could you please hurry it up? I have a plane to catch. I have to get... He has a sales meet in another... I guess state or another part of the country.
Yeah, one of those sales.
And he needs to get to that.
Mm-hmm. So he needs his breakfast so he can get going.
Yep. So she says, "All right, don't get your trousers in a twit."
Mm-hmm.
So drops the plate off, puts it in front of him. I don't think he really said anything of note.
No.
So he eats his breakfast.
Walter was kind of superfluous this episode.
Very superfluous in this episode. Yeah. I don't think there was really any need for him. I don't think there was any need for him.
No.
So, at that point, Mrs. Nogatuk picks up a plant that she had in the living room, and she says that she's going to give it a few drops of alcohol.
I never heard of giving alcohol to a plant.
Neither
as far as I would think, I would think alcohol would kill a plant.
Yes, because it's alcohol and it dries.
Yeah.
But she says that we'll have a potted plant.
Yeah.
Which I think was the reason for the joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a potted plant obviously means a drunk plant.
Yeah, but this started her whole...
there was a bit revolving around the plant. So Mrs. Nogatuk exits into the living room, and then as she exits, we hear Maude start singing, "She's in love, she's in love, she's in..." What was that? Is that from... What musical is that from?
Is it South Pacific?
I think it's South Pacific. Yeah.
Yes, I'm in love with a wonderful guy.
Yep, that is where it's from. You know what other song comes from there? I'm gonna wash that man right out of my hair. Was that Gershwin?
Gershwin?
Not Gershwin.
No.
Oh, what is the... Oh, for frick's sake.
I don't know.
It wasn't Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Are you sure? I think maybe that's who it was.
Maybe it was Rodgers and Hammerstein.
I think it was.
Or Hammerstein.
South Pacific.
Composed by Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
There you go. You knew more than you thought.
I knew more than I thought.
You knew more than you thought you did, pussycat.
Wonderful. My gay card is still intact.
It's still valid.
Still valid.
It's still valid.
So she comes in singing. She's in love with a wonderful guy, and she wraps her arms around Walter, who's still sitting down. Yes. And Walter says, "Who's in love with a wonderful guy?" And what does Maude say?
Not me.
And Walter's like, "Thank you, darling. Right on time with my morning insult."
Right. So Maude is excited because she's had another date with this guy she's seeing. Maude doesn't know who it is.
Maude does not know who it is, but she's been late every night for the past 6 weeks. I mean, these days, 6 weeks really isn't all that much.
No.
But 6 weeks is a blip on the radar of love.
Yeah. So,
Maude's like, it has to be love. She's ruining her health.
Yes.
Because she's been late every day. Yes. She's been late every later, coming in at all hours of the morning, and just being reckless with her sleep schedule.
Yes.
So at that point,
didn't Mrs. Nogatuk
Mrs. Nogatuk comes back and she's holding the plant. She says, My, haven't you grown?
Yes.
Shows what a little fertilizer can do for you. And of course, Maude perks her head up thinking that she's being talking to.
Yes, that she's talking about her.
Being spoken to about Maude. And Mrs. Nogatuk. And Maude turns around, looks at her, and Mrs. Nogatuk says, "Not you, madam, him."
Yeah, the plant. And Mrs. Nogatuk goes into this explanation about how, you have to talk to the plants to get them to grow.
Which, again, harkens back to the episode with the picket, where Maude and Walter were arguing about the plants. And it's almost... The running joke is Maude is nothing like the stereotypical housewife.
Right.
She is not a good gardener. She is not a good cook. She is not a good... the only thing she's really good at is in the bedroom and in the office.
Right.
Those are the two places that she really shines.
Excels.
Really excels. There you go. That's the term I'm looking for. So at that point, Maude says this very interesting thing where she goes, "I don't believe that for a second."
Right.
And Mrs. Nogatuk's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And I think Maude says, "Dick Cavett had a talk show. He never grew an inch." I remember watching. Do you remember watching a couple of Dick Cavett interviews? One of the last one I watched was him with Mae West, and I wish that somebody else had interviewed her. Like
wasn't good?
Every time I watch it, I'm just like, Dick, you're fawning over her like a schoolgirl. Don't do that.
Well, she was an icon.
She was an icon.
Really, how would you have been?
Honestly, probably groveling at her feet.
Yeah, right. So, what do you want me to tell you, pussycat?
It's true. You make a valid point.
So I think then Maude sees that there's a postcard from Philip, right?
Yeah, it's a postcard from Philip. He's at camp.
Yeah.
He's at sleepaway camp in Vermont.
Yeah, so I guess maybe we've explained Philip not being...
So Philip is not in the house.
In the house.
He is not there.
It's important to, put this all into place. How...
Yes.
Who's not in the house.
Who's not in the house.
Mm-hmm.
So, Maude says, I'm going to go run this up to Carol's room. She's probably sleeping she's so exhausted from the nights that she's been having.
Right.
And Walter says, no, don't worry. I got to go up there anyway because I have to finish packing. And he'll slip it under the door. Right. And, Maude's like, well, please just be quiet, be careful because she does need her sleep. And at that point, Walter runs upstairs. Mrs. Naugatuck, I think, is still in the kitchen. And Carol enters wearing this beautiful burgundy floor-length gown. Very, very attractive. And she's like raising her hands and showing off her chest and all that fun stuff. And she's like, hello, mother. Just so dreamy-eyed and sleepy.
And Maude is like, aren't you a little overdressed just to get the morning paper?
Yep. And, Carol's being very coquettish and very coy.
Right.
And being very playful with her mother, basically being like, here's your news.
Maude said, do you have any news for me?
And Carol says, sure, here. Yeah. And answer the morning paper.
Yes.
So at this point, there's this cute little bit between Maude and Carol where Carol's like, Mother, I'm in. And Maude cuts her off saying, you're in love with a fabulous, wonderful, glorious man. And Carol's like, oh, and Mother, like last night. And Maude again cuts her off saying, last night was the best night of your life.
He told you he loved you.
And that you're going to get married. And Carol's like, Mother, were you in the backseat of my car? Were you in the backseat of the car? And what did Maude say?
She said, what did she say? How did she? I forget exactly.
No, but I suspect you were.
I suspect you were, yes.
And just, again, I always appreciate Bee's delivery of a line. And I don't know if we've mentioned this. One of her mentors was Sid Caesar.
Oh.
And I want to watch more of his work because he was another one who was a very good, he had wonderful timing.
Yes. Those old time comedians.
They had great timing, great phenomenal timing. Yes. I actually, since we were discussing Pat Carroll earlier, I watched her interview that was posted just 3 months ago on YouTube, where it was the pioneers of television, and she was who they were interviewing, and just such a plucky, spry older woman. She still was even in that interview. And she was like mentioning, Lucille Ball, Carol Burnett, Mary Tyler Moore, and just talking up these old masters of comedy, and just seeing how they all interacted. Like some would take props home and sleep with them and just begin to trust the props, just for physical comedy's sake. And she was talking about, just a lot of the old masters like Red Skelton, Buster Keaton, who was the other one? Rags Ragland. And just these masters of comedy and physical comedy. And just, it's so fascinating to just listen and hear and just see all these stories. And now with the advent of YouTube, I mean, that's been around since the 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
You can watch all of them in action.
Yeah.
And, as actors go, I love watching old Hollywood actors. I mean, I love Betty Davis, Carole Lombard, Norma Shearer, Joan Crawford. Just watching them and how they act and how they interact with things. And I will say this past weekend, I finally got to watch, because I'd only seen clips of it. I finally just recently got to watch Being the Ricardos with Nicole Kidman and I cannot think of the actor who played Ricky. But it was it was a good movie. I'm not going to say that it was an accurate depiction, but two of the executive producers were Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr.
Right. Javier Bardem,
who is gorgeous.
He's a very handsome man.
He is very attractive.
Very handsome.
And it was fascinating and interesting to see. It was a small picture of what being Lucille Ball was like. I'm not going to say that Nicole Kidman did a good job of impersonating Lucille Ball. She had the voice, and she had some of the mannerisms, but she really didn't have the face,
right?
Which you can't help that.
Right.
Like Renee Zellweger does not look like Judy Garland,
right?
but she was good in the part.
Right.
And again, one of the things that I noticed was I kept on looking at Nicole Kidman, and I was recognizing, as an actor, and I was just looking at, you saw the wheels turning. Like, every time you looked at Nicole Kidman, you saw the wheels turning. You saw how she can sound like Lucille. You saw how she could look and act and move like Lucille Ball. It was just very entertaining to me. That alone was entertaining to me. The woman that played Vivian Vance was very good. J.K. Simmons as Bill Frawley was excellent.
He was what you call it, from the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, he was J Jameson. Thank you,
yes.
J Jameson.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have my Marvel, my nerd card taken away from me.
You are.
But yes, so again, in terms of actors and actresses, everyone learned from somebody.
I have to say, when we talk about like those type of movies, and yes, it's like it gets like, you know, laughed at, but Faye Dunaway as Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest.
She, upon rewatching it, because after you and I have laughed about it a number of times, I downloaded it and I was like watching it, and I was just, again, paying very close attention to Faye Dunaway and her mannerisms, the way that she looked at certain characters, her makeup, like everything was very polished.
Yeah.
And, say what you want about Faye Dunaway, how she's this awful, tyrannical, monstrous woman.
Right.
And there have been plenty of people that have said that she is just that.
Yes.
She was still fabulous in that role.
Yeah. I mean, if you just look at the role, at her performance. You separate everything out.
Separate the actor from the performance.
Just look at that performance. That was like an incredible performance. And I almost sort of think, sometimes when I think of Joan Crawford,
you only think
I see Faye Dunaway in Mommy Dearest.
It's very true.
That's how good she was.
And not for nothing, Mommy Dearest at the time, like, really did a number on both Faye's and Joan's career.
Yeah.
Like, even though Joan had been long since dead. She was long dead.
Yeah.
It was just very interesting to just watch how she sort of manipulated and made the character her own. But, from an editing standpoint, there was a very poorly edited movie.
You think?
Very poorly edited. There were some points where it was like, Joan's at the height of her career. Now she's old suddenly, and Christina goes from being this young ingenue to now being in a Catholic church, a soap opera star. It was the transitions were not as clean as they should have been. But that's also
there was a lot to get in.
There was not only a lot to get in. I remember reading it spanned her career from, I think, 1940 something until her death.
Yeah.
That's like,
it's a lot.
That's a very long time.
Span. Yeah.
A long span to try and squeeze into one movie. And there was also a lot that was edited out.
Well, I think also the book didn't come out that, the movie came out very quickly after the book was released. After the book. So there wasn't to me it was like...
And there were a lot of changing hands.
Yeah.
Lots of changed hands.
So I feel like there was probably a lot of...
There was... One thing that was edited...
They might have been kind of rushed.
Oh, very much rushed.
Yeah.
Very much rushed. There was one scene that I'm really a little frustrated and sad that they removed. It was a humanizing scene where Joan was with Christina and the two of them were having a conversation at a beach somewhere. It was filmed. The entire scene was filmed. And it sort of showed the human side of Joan Crawford. Where, she was explaining... My life as a young actress was awful.
Right.
Like, I was abused. I was sexually abused. I was assaulted. I had a very poor upbringing, and yet I still managed to...
They might have been worried about legal repercussions.
Not only legal repercussions. I genuinely think they didn't want to put a spotlight on the hardships that Joan faced as a young woman. Yeah. Especially during the 70s.
Yeah.
Because it came out in
late 70s.
78, 79?
Something, around that.
Some of that effect.
Did you read the book?
I never read the book.
Yeah,
I want to
read the book.
I would like to read the book.
Yeah, it's a good book. But
I always love reading autobiographies of old Hollywood starlets. I'd love to read BJ. What was Betty Davis's daughter's name?
Oh, I can't remember.
Is it BJ or BD?
BD.
BD Davis.
Yeah.
BD. She
another one who said that
Betty Davis was monstrous.
Yeah, but for some reason doesn't have the reputation that Joan Crawford has.
I mean, honestly, at that point, after Joan Crawford's movie, would you really want to do another documentary, another mockumentary of another Hollywood star?
Yeah, right. True.
Especially like that one.
True.
I mean, they did it with Feud.
Yes.
Feud, that was, obviously, that was produced by,
Ryan Murphy?
Ryan Murphy, thank you. Ryan Murphy produced, who was famous for American Horror Story, produced Feud, which was the Betty Jones story.
Right.
It sort of tapped into the relationship between BD and Betty and her mother Betty Davis. It didn't really dive headlong into it, but again, same thing with Being the Ricardos, same thing with Betty and Joe. You always have to take these stories that are told through a specific lens with a grain of salt.
True.
And
it's coming from one person's point of view,
one person's perspective.
So
I'm sure there was a lot of research put into it.
Yeah. But oh well.
I would have been intrigued to see Anne Bancroft as Joan Crawford. But she, as a matter of fact, I think, who was it recently? I think it was not Heckelina, Lipsinka. Lipsinka said in an interview that Lipsinka met Anne Bancroft backstage at one of their shows. Lipsinka is a very famous drag queen who was very infamous for bringing to light the Barbara Please scene from Mommy Dearest. And Lipsinka had a conversation with Anne Bancroft, and Anne was like, Lipsinka had asked, so you were supposed to originally be Joan Crawford, and Anne Bancroft just brushed her hand across her face and said, dodged a bullet there.
Oh.
Yeah, she did not want to be a part of it. Oh. She would have wanted to be a part, but again, so many changing hands. And when you're part of a production where there's that many changes happening, it can get very overwhelming and very frustrating.
Yes. That's funny. Somebody like an actress, feeling like, oh, good thing I didn't take that. Bette Midler was supposed to be in Sister Act.
In Sister Act, yeah.
And she decided not to do Sister Act
because she felt
Hocus Pocus. Yes, she did Hocus Pocus instead of doing Sister Act.
She did Hocus Pocus instead. They both came out in 93.
Yes.
You're right.
And at the time that Hocus Pocus came out, it really was a flop.
Hocus Pocus, because it aired, it was broadcast in theaters during the summer of 93, which, why would you have
a Halloween movie? Yeah.
I mean, it was the same thing with the Addams Family. I think the Addams Family was released during the summer, and it was released technically as a Christmas movie. Because it opens, and there's the carolers. So it's always interesting how they release specific films and whatnot. But I remember reading that Bette Midler said one of the biggest regrets was her not taking Sister Act.
But now you look at how things
have progressed,
and now it's like, well, it's not so bad now that she did.
It's not so bad that
Hocus
she did
Pocus.
It's become a cult. It took on a life of its own.
Yeah, it's become iconic.
It's become iconic. It's become a cult favorite.
So I guess you just never know.
It's true.
You never know.
You never ever know.
All right, now getting back.
Not to digress.
Yes, but we have.
But Hollywood loves nostalgia these days.
Yes.
Hollywood adores nostalgia. Nostalgia is a cash cow. And if they can market nostalgia in a way that can make them more money, they'll do it.
Yeah.
That's why we have a Hocus Pocus 2, and apparently a Sister Act 3 is in development.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there's very little, new ideas coming out. And also, I think, it's the climate that we're living in. It's like, you turn on the news and everything is horrible.
Oh, correct. Everything's depressing.
So, things like that are nostalgic, it's like brings back thoughts of happy times, yada, yada. And
it's like we're living in the 50s all over again.
Yes.
Everything's nostalgia. Everything harkens back to a specific age, including our policies. Anyway, now that we've come back from the tangent...
But of course, our doing a podcast about a show from the 70s is in no way nostalgic.
Is in no way nostalgic at all. But again, the reason why I wanted to do this in the first place was because so many things that were discussed in this show
are relevant.
Relevant to this.
They're still
relevant.
relevant.
To this day.
Yes, they are still relevant.
And again, as a matter of fact, me and my cousin were having a conversation this past weekend because she didn't know that women were only allowed to get a credit card in 1974.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know that, and when I read that to her, she was just like, "That is absolute horseshit." I'm like, "Yeah, it is," but that was the time.
Mm-hmm.
That was the time, and it was even discussed in that one episode where Maude finds out that she isn't the trustee on Walter's will.
Right.
Arthur was.
Yes.
So
it's true.
Just women have made strides.
Yes.
So,
So I think we're at the point now where Mrs. Naugatuck comes in from the kitchen.
Yes.
And Maude is like, Mrs. Naugatuck, my baby daughter is in love.
Yes.
And that's when I think Maude starts questioning Carol.
Well, wait, wasn't there that moment where Maude mentions that she apologized for stepping on Philip's Spiro Agnew watch?
Oh.
Yeah, that was a joke. I caught that joke and I was like, oh, that's adorable.
Oh, I missed that.
So I think at that point, after that joke lands, Mrs. Naugatuck comes in and Maude's like, oh, my baby girl, she's in love. Mrs. Naugatuck starts singing, she's in love. And Maude shuts her up and says, I already sang that.
Yes. Nice try, but I work alone.
That's right.
Basically.
That's right. Maude is the star of the show, and she will let you know that she is the star of the show. Mm-hmm. So I think at that point, they're sitting down, and I think Carol says, "Oh, I'm in love with his name is Harold."
Well, no, doesn't Maude do it? Tell me all about. And
yes, tell me all about.
And that's when Carol's like, Harold.
Yes,
he's the greatest guy in the world.
Yep. And Maude's like Harold, Harold and Carol.
Harold and Carol.
That's always been my favorite name. Again, just really laying it on thick.
And that's when Maude says, "You know what I'm gonna do," and she gets up.
Yes, I do. She goes to get this beautiful vase.
Yes, it's blue and white.
Very beautiful.
My husband's favorite kind of china. By the way.
Yes, I have seen. I have borne witness.
You've borne witness to the blue and white china.
So it was.
Yes.
The way it worked was Maude's grandmother gave it to Maude's mother, who then gave it to her, and now Maude is giving it to Carol.
Yes,
on the day she marries.
On the day she marries.
That's the specific point.
And she's making sure to tell her it's her prized possession.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
And, Harold, when you get married to Harold, Carol, what is Harold's last name? Yes, and Carol, with this big smile on her face,
going to be the future Mrs.
Harold Loftus.
Loftus.
And at that point,
Maude drops the vase.
And
it shatters.
Shatters everywhere. Yes. And here's my thing. Yeah. Have you ever stepped on broken china wearing shoes?
Mm-hmm. I'm sure I must have.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. And especially because, now, look, we wear sneakers.
Mm-hmm.
Maude was wearing flats.
Right.
I would not step on anything wearing just flats.
Oh, yeah, no.
And Maude proceeds to stomp.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Viciously on the vase.
On the vase.
And, Carol's like, well, Mother, what about Grandma's vase? And Maude's like, the hell with Grandma!
The hell with it.
Yes. And, Mrs. Naugatuck then says, at least she doesn't have to clear up the mess. Because obviously, Mrs. Naugatuck will have to clean the mess.
Of course. And that's when Maude goes into this thing that, Harold is married.
Yep.
And Carol's saying, oh, he's separated. He's getting a divorce.
They're getting a divorce. And, Maude's like, come on, Carol. Harold and Marilyn have been divorced so many times. It's like people changing sheets.
They separate more times than people change their
sheets.
Their socks.
Their socks, that's what it was. Thank you.
And Carol's trying to tell Maude, to stop being so melodramatic. Maude is insisting he's a womanizer.
Yeah.
I guess when they play canasta.
He puts his hand on her knee.
On her knee.
And Maude's like, and it's not even with me. He does it with less attractive women.
Yes, Harriet Krause.
Harriet Krause, who could win Best of Breed at the Tuckahoe Dog Show.
Yes.
That was so rude.
So mean.
But she adores Harriet, I'm sure.
I'm sure, yes. Poor Harriet.
Poor Mother, her name is Joanna.
And Carol is insisting Harold is a sensitive, gentle man.
Yes.
So then Maude starts saying, well, how could you do this to Marilyn?
And we find this, I was actually very happy with this, very happy about this moment because we hearken back to when Maude had her hysterectomy.
Yes.
And, Maude's like, when I had my hysterectomy, Marilyn came to the hospital and gave me a gift, which I thought was so charming, even if it was the joy of sex. So she's like, Carol, I'm not going to let you break up their marriage.
Yes.
Which, have you ever been in that type of situation?
No.
You've never been with a married man?
Oh, I'm sure I was, but I wasn't. But I wasn't gonna break up a relationship.
I don't classify myself as a homewrecker, and
listen, we're going back now to the 90s. Okay.
That's true. This is the 90s.
Okay, we're going back to the 90s. What we're going to do right now is go back. Right? Are you ready? Okay. So, way back in the annals of time, in the day, when there existed a thing called the AOL group chats.
The chat rooms. The chat rooms. Oh, the chat rooms.
And I was single, and I was single, so I would, meet up with,
guys. You'd hook up.
Yeah, I hooked up. I wasn't looking for a relationship, and a lot of them were married, and they were, fooling around with guys outside, married heterosexual marriage.
Everyone's straight these days.
Yeah, and we're fooling around outside of the marriage with guys.
Of course, yes.
So, but I was never like.
And I think, not for nothing, I honestly think that's one of the reasons why gays get a bad rep. I really do, because, it's just another one of those things to pin blame on somebody else other than the person actively doing what's wrong.
Right.
Like, instead of saying, oh, the straight married man is instead of, oh, a gay guy is sleeping with a straight married guy, it should be, no, the straight married guy is sleeping with the gay guy.
Right.
Like, it is not our fault.
Right.
And again, it's one of the reasons why I remember having a conversation with my therapist, actually, and I said to her, I do not feel guilty having affairs with these men. Mm-hmm. I think they feel more guilty than I do.
Oh, sure.
And again, it's just one of those moments where it's like, and here's where I get a little psychological. I have said that there are two very good reasons why a man would do what he does. Mm-hmm. The first one being he was not allowed to experiment and experience his own gender and his own sexuality because he was not allowed to.
True.
And when you get to a certain age, and of course with the advent of the internet, you can meet and talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And the other one was they're just not sexually fulfilled in their own relationships.
Right.
And, there's help out there should you choose to go out and find it. Because I tell you, you're not going to find it in Big Daddy XXL's Grindr profile. Okay?
No.
Okay, great.
No.
So,
it is true.
That is my feelings on the subject.
But I'm sure, some of these guys, I knew they were married. A lot of them, I don't know what I didn't know what they were. You didn't know what they were. I mean, they could have been. They may not have been. But, I was like, that's on them. It was like...
It's on them. It's their responsibility. Yeah. It's not ours.
Yeah.
Not ours.
It wasn't my responsibility.
So at this point, there's this bit between Dorothy.
Maude and Carol.
Between Maude and Carol.
About whether Maude is her best friend or her mother.
Or her mother.
Yes.
And, you want... It really is this very charming bit where, again, during the 70s, mothers were more like the best friend and not like the mother.
Yeah, there was a whole thing in the 70s about, est and getting in touch with your inner self and your feelings. It was like, there was a whole big thing in the 70s, which came out of the hippie movement.
Which came out of the hippie movement in the 60s.
So, sort of like a new parenting style.
Yes.
Where, people were trying to be more of a friend to the child than be the parent. It was never good.
So this is obviously one of those instances where that would not fly.
Right.
because Maude's like, don't contradict me, Carol. I'm your mother.
I'm your mother. And she's like, well,
So,
I thought you were my best friend.
And Carol's like, mother, friend, knock it off.
Right. Yeah.
And
Carol says to her, she's like, well, as my best friend, what would you say to me?
What would you say to me? And Maude says, listen to your mother, Carol. So obviously, all roads point to just listen to Maude and don't do the thing you want to do.
Yes. So Carol tells her to knock it off.
Yeah.
Maude's like, taken aback. And Carol would say that to me. She said, to think that I
hosted 37 Tupperware parties to have your teeth straightened.
That's right. Do you have any Tupperware at home? My mother sold Tupperware.
At one point, my mother did go to a few Pampered Chef.
I still have
parties.
some Pampered Chef stuff.
She did those.
But Pampered Chef was different than
Tupperware. Yes. And of course,
I still have I have like the Pizza Stone.
We would be remiss if mentioning Tupperware. We did not talk about Aunt Barbara.
Aunt Barbara, yes.
Whom we have. Do you love it? You love it. Do you like Aunt Barbara?
Yeah. I've met Aunt Barbara.
She's fabulous.
Yes.
She's absolutely fabulous. We cannot speak highly enough of her.
Yes.
A fabulous, fabulous talent indeed. But no, I can safely say that I do not have any Tupperware. My mother has Pyrex, old Pyrex from years ago.
The thing I loved most about Tupperware was they had like these deviled egg Tupperware containers.
Because of course. And you put the deviled egg on and it had its lid that went on. Had the lid that goes over it and you can just carry it about.
You can take it to, a part, a fancy party or something like that.
Back in the day when people had parties like that.
Yeah. Yes.
So yes, Maude threw 37 Tupperware parties to have Carol's teeth straightened.
To have them straightened.
I have written down next, she loves you too much to let that once.
Don't we get into a conversation between Carol and Mrs. Naugatuck at this point?
Yes.
Where Carol is asking Mrs. Naugatuck, if she thinks what she's doing is she's so wrong. And Mrs. Naugatuck says that she knows how they both feel.
Yes.
And Carol asks her, well, what do you think? And that's
Mrs. Naugatuck then tells a story about how she was in a relationship with a married man once.
And it turned into a diabolical situation.
And Carol's like, well, what do you mean? What was so bad about it? Was the marriage really... What the hell did Carol say? Because I know Mrs. Naugatuck's comeback line to that.
Yes.
But I forget what Carol asked that led her to say that.
Yes.
But I think Carol ended up saying, was the marriage really that bad, or was the marriage really that awful?
Right.
And I think Mrs. Naugatuck says I was the one he was married to.
Mm-hmm.
And, the audience got a good chuckle out of that.
Yes.
So at that point, Maude storms back in saying, I know exactly what I'm going to do to put this to squash this whole thing. I'm going to call Marilyn.
Yes.
And, Carol is irate at that point, saying, don't you dare do that.
She says, I won't have my mother calling my fiance's
ex-wife. That was...
Fiance's wife. Not even ex-wife.
She said wife?
She said wife.
That line threw me for a loop, man.
Mm-hmm.
That line definitely threw me for a loop. So I think Carol exits.
Well, I know Mrs. Naugatuck...
No. Carol doesn't exit.
No.
Maude, I think, asks Mrs. Naugatuck what she should do. Or Carol asks Mrs. Naugatuck what should happen next. And Mrs. Naugatuck says, Carol, I think your mother should not interfere and mind her own business.
Mind her own business.
And that's when we get the line. Mrs. Naugatuck, God will get you for that.
Yes.
And, Mrs. Naugatuck now is incensed, saying, if you wanted a parrot, you should have hired one. Or if you wanted a yes man, you should have hired a parrot. And Maude's like, believe me, between the parrot and you, the parrot would get more work done.
And she tells her, butt out, Naugatuck.
Yep. And, Mrs. Naugatuck gets incensed again, like, who are you telling to butt out?
Right. And she says, I quit. Here's me feather duster. And you know where you can put it.
Yep. And that's exactly what happened. So at that point, Mrs. Naugatuck goes upstairs to obviously pack, and Maude turns to Carol. It's like, great, I've now lost
my housekeeper.
Lost my housekeeper
Yeah.
because I think she said because of Carol. No, she didn't blame Carol.
She blamed Harold.
She blamed Harold.
Yeah,
Yes, that's what happened.
Yes.
Like she said it's Harold Loftus' fault.
Yes. And Carol's like, I want you to be happy for me. And she's telling her, she's saying, you've ruined the happiest day of my life.
Just destroyed it. You destroyed the best day of my life. And Maude's like, Carol, it was destroyed before it began.
Mm-hmm. And Maude tells her she needs to face up to the truth.
Yep. He will be no good for Marilyn, and he will be no good for you.
That's right.
And at that point, Carol says, that's it, I'm moving out.
She's moving out too.
Yes. So, Carol runs upstairs to start packing, and I think at that point, Walter comes downstairs. And
finally, he's been up, for
been
somebody who was in such a rush.
Oh, he was certainly taking his time packing. So, Maude says to Walter, Carol is moving out, Mrs. Naugatuck is leaving, and Walter's like, well, what happened? And what happened to she's in love with the wonderful guy? And Maude's like, the wonderful guy, you ready, is Harold Loftus. And he comes out with the one-handed canasta player. That was funny.
And we know why he's only a one-handed canasta player.
Correct.
Because the other hand
is
playing around. Yes. So Walter's saying that he has to go.
He has a plane to catch.
But he asks Maude. He says, why don't you come with me? Maybe my speech will cheer you up.
And it was triple-digit profits with double-digit inflation.
Yes. To which Maude just says, "Bye,
goodbye,
sweetie.
Dear. Goodbye, sweetie.
Bye, sweetie." Yes. Yes. The speech was not going to cheer her up.
So at that point,
Mrs. Naugatuck comes down. She's in this crazy outfit and the hat with the giant feather.
With the giant feather in it. They always put her in the most unique costume.
Yes.
So, Walter leaves, and then Mrs. Naugatuck comes downstairs saying, goodbye, dear. I think she said, I'll give you my forwarding address, or something to that effect, and I think Maude says, good, the rest of your belongings will be out on the front lawn.
Yes.
And, Mrs. Naugatuck turns around and says, goodbye, dear. And Maude's like, goodbye, dear. And Mrs. Naugatuck says,
I was talking to the plant.
And she storms off.
Then Carol comes down with a little overnight bag.
Yep.
She's out the door.
Yep.
And so basically she
Maude
leaves.
is now sitting at the bar, and the camera pans slowly down to show the plant.
Yes.
And Maude looks at it and goes,
because now Maude is
all alone.
All alone.
Yep.
That's the name of the title, and
then there were none.
So there were none. She was all alone.
Yep.
So she's looking at the plant,
and she says, "The hell do you know? You never had children." And then we cut to commercial.
When we
come back, Maude is at Vivian's. Now
yes.
here. You know what? We're going to keep on discussing the episode, and we'll get to it in just a moment because I have questions.
Okay.
I have questions for the writers.
I may have answers.
So at this point, Maude is getting a salad ready with Vivian because she's obviously over there for lunch.
Right.
And Maude is sort of monologuing about how she didn't want to she didn't want to kick Carol out. She only wanted to. She didn't want to be a meddling mother. And while she's saying all of these things, she cuts by saying radishes, green peppers, bamboo shoots. And while she's saying all of these things, all Vivian is saying is, I know.
Yes.
And, this happens about 3 times. And each time it gets more and more annoying.
Yes.
Because we obviously see B's face just continuing to sour.
Yes. I think the last one was when Maude says, I've driven my daughter out of the house. And that's when Vivian does the third, I know.
Vivian, I love you. But one more I know. And so help me! And she's holding this giant stalk of celery.
Yes.
Obviously, because she's going to clock Vivian. But I really liked Rue's look in this episode. She had that beautiful blue eyeshadow. Her hair was coiffed very nicely. And she was in this very sturdy blue outfit.
Yeah, she looked good.
And that was all we really saw of Rue for the episode.
Yeah.
So at that point, There was 3 things I always told Carol: never to take candy from strangers, don't eat the burgers at the drugstore. Have you ever?
I was like, eat a burger at the drugstore.
Well, you know, drugstores used to sell food.
Yeah, I guess like Woolworths. They used to have like a luncheonette counter.
Yep.
So.
I mean, I remember there was one episode I remember specifically of I Love Lucy where Ricky ordered breakfast at the drugstore, and that he picked it up and brought it home because it was the episode where they were arguing about how women are supposed to be like the people the girls that stay at home,
right,
to cook, to clean, to be barefoot and pregnant, and the men are the ones that go out to work,
right.
And if I remember correctly, Ricky didn't make the breakfast, but he got it prepared at the drugstore,
right.
And when the phone rang, Lucy answered it, and Lucy sat back down and she said to Ricky, "By gosh, you're a good cook." And he goes, "Well, who was that on the phone?" And Lucy says, "Oh, that was the drugstore telling me the order, something about paying to the order of for the breakfast."
Right.
So that was definitely something.
Yeah. So the hamburger was number 2, and number 3
was wear clean underwear.
Now, my mother always told me that.
My mother the same. My mother the same. My mother's the same. Always wear clean underwear.
And if you ever, God forbid, you're in an accident and they have to take your clothes off.
Take your clothes off.
And then you don't have clean underwear.
It's one of those things where I'm like, thank God we have progressed so much as a people where we don't need to worry about that.
But you know what? It still sticks in my head.
It's just one of those things.
In my head.
Because we were told about it for years.
Yeah.
We were told about it through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, even before that. And let me tell you something.
Yes.
There is a picture circulating the interwebs of
the interweaves?
The interweaves of a Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering tournament. And there were these white chairs with these brown stains on them. Obviously because men do not know how to bathe.
Oh.
There was something I remember reading on Urban Dictionary called gooch grease. You're not going to like where I'm going with this.
Okay.
Gooch grease is a combination of sweat, fecal matter, and I'm trying to think of something else, but it usually happens when a man specifically does not properly wash the crack of their behind. Now, when I personally am in the shower, I usually just use water, and that's it. I don't use a rag. I just it's water, and that's that. There are some men that just don't even bother.
You know, some straight men, they're like...
Some straight men are so weirded out by it.
Like, cleaning themselves.
There was another thing... Like,
it's going to turn them gay to touch
like,
themselves.
it's just going to touch their booty hole, it's going to turn them queer.
Gay, right?
Like, I really...
I mean, if you're that afraid of it, you're sublimating something major.
Correct.
You know?
You are hiding something far much more insidious.
Yeah. So... But... Were they sitting on the chairs naked? How did they get, like...
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. A lot of the times, like, men will just not wear proper fitting. I had this... Who was I talking to? I had this conversation with my friend Rick last night, where I was just like, men do not know how to properly dress themselves. Straight, cis men do not know how to dress themselves.
God, no.
Unless you're Steve Harvey, but that's irrelevant.
I'm sure somebody does it for him.
I'm positive he has a stylist.
Also, he's African American.
He's African American, and African American men do know
they know how to dress.
And if I had to take a stab in the dark, I would say they're ill-fitting shorts that when they go to slide, it slides their shorts down, and then they're bare-assed on the chair.
Oh God! Oh no!
There was a tweet that I saw that was like, you know, we don't need deodorant. Deodorant was a product of a specific time to just market for whatever it was. It was something like that. And then someone commented on it saying, go to an anime convention and then come talk to me about not using deodorant. Because let me tell you something. There is nothing quite as pungent as the gaming room of an anime convention. You go in there, it smells like you're in a gin locker.
Oh, God.
Oh, it's tragic.
Oh.
That's one of the reasons why, like, I get into my drag and I just douse myself in perfume.
Right.
So.
Oh, boy.
Do you have any fun convention stories?
No, because I've never really gone,
really?
done conventions. Like, when I was a kid, I went to a couple comic book conventions.
We need to fix that.
But I never went to, like, a cosplay convention.
We need to fix that.
We do need to fix that.
We will fix that.
We will fix that.
You can go as Super Sophia and I'll go
Super
as Super
Sophia and Beeple.
Or I was thinking...
What?
Did I tell you that I was looking up a Wolverine costume for you?
No.
I was!
Sophia Vereen.
I was thinking of getting you as a Wolverine costume so you could do Sophia in it.
Sophia Vereen.
Sophia Vereen.
Mm-hmm.
I know that actress. So, at that point, to get back to the episode, we find out that
we left off with the clean underwear. So Vivian comments that she thinks Harold is cute.
And that he's even, like, and then Maude's like, he's a womanizing, lecherous, disgusting man.
He's a lech.
And he'll make a pass at anything.
Yes.
And, Vivian's just like, he made a pass at me.
Yeah.
And Maude just shuts her up saying, that proves my point.
Yes. And Vivian's telling her that, she has no right to interfere. And then I think that's when she goes over to Maude goes over to the phone.
Vivian mentions how, like, she should just call Marilyn, or like Vivian suggests that Maude call Marilyn, and Maude's like, I can't call Marilyn because Carol doesn't want me to interfere.
She doesn't want me to meddle.
So of course, at that point, Maude immediately goes over to the phone, and Vivian's like, well, who are you calling? And Maude's like, Marilyn. And Vivian's just hapless, like, well, Maude, what did you? I lied.
So of course she's
so
on the phone.
Marilyn picks up the phone, and it's a very funny bit that Maude does.
Very funny one-sided conversation.
Very funny one-sided comment. One-sided conversation where Maude is like, "Hello, Marilyn. Marilyn, I sound terrible. I always sound terrible.
Yes.
What, Marilyn? Okay. I'll see you soon.
You're on your way over to my
house
with chicken soup.
Yes." So she hangs up the phone, and we now know that Marilyn is on her way
over to Maude's house
with chicken soup.
Yes.
So,
and I think Maude said to her, "Oh, I'm so lucky to have a friend like you."
Yep.
Right?
And, goes over to hug Vivian, and at that point,
Mrs. Naugatuck walks in. Yes.
Saying, what the hell? And then Maude says, what the hell is she doing here? And we also find out that Carol has been staying with Vivian.
Yes, Carol has been staying.
Carol has been staying with Vivian.
Yes.
Now, here's my question. Maude, as a character, would instinctively know that that Carol and Mrs. Naugatuck would be staying at Vivian's.
Right.
How could she not know that?
Well, I guess they were going out of their way not to let Maude know.
I guess. And it may have been...
Knowing that Maude is Maude...
And considering it may have been later that day.
Don't let Maude... Don't tell Maude. Don't tell her we're here. I'm sure.
So, Mrs. Naugatuck comes out. Maude asks, what the hell is she doing here? And, she yells at Vivian saying, what are you doing? Running a home for wayward girls?
Right.
And she storms out of the house. Yes. And Mrs. Naugatuck looks at Vivian and says, she insulted me. That means she still loves me.
Of course, Vivian.
And falls into Vivian's arms, and Vivian's like rubbing her shoulder, saying, I know. Poor Rue. She only had a couple of lines, but the check's still cleared.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, we come back to Carol.
Yeah.
We cut to Carol in the Finley's house.
She's on the phone.
Talking to Harold, saying that she found an apartment. Which, finding an apartment in one day, good for you.
I know.
Good for you doing
that.
Right?
And it's at that point Maude walks in, and she's like, Carol!
Well, actually, hold on. There's something very important
what did I
missing
miss?
Out. Harold tells Carol that he's going to come over and help her pack.
Yes!
So not only is Marilyn coming over with the chicken soup,
but so is Harold.
But Harold's coming over to help Carol pack.
Yes.
So Maude enters and she sees Carol and she's just so happy. And she says to Carol, years ago I gave you a nickel to throw into the wishing well, and you said, I wish I could always stay with my mommy.
Yes.
And, at that point, Carol's like, I found an apartment.
Yes.
And I'm leaving tonight. And Maude says, I won my nickel back.
Yes.
It was the only time a band was mentioned in this show
right.
that I was tickled by.
She says,
So-
I just came for my things. I made up my mind.
Yep. And she goes upstairs.
And the doorbell rings.
And then the doorbell rings, and Maude immediately races to the phone. Well,
the door.
No. The door doesn't ring yet.
Oh, it doesn't?
Maude, so Carol goes upstairs. Maude says, Marilyn.
Oh, Marilyn. Yes.
Marilyn's coming over.
Yes.
Oh, please.
Let her
if
be
you
home.
really exist, let her be home.
And
the door, she goes to pick up the phone. The doorbell rings, and Maude screams, Nobody listens to me.
That's right.
I've said that a number of times.
Yes. So, of course, it is Marilyn at the door.
And, of course, Maude is like, Marilyn, we really must do this again. And tries to shut her out.
But Marilyn has a box of candy
Marilyn
for
has
her.
a box of candy that she was initially going to give to her mother.
To her own mother.
And it was really hysterical because there was this funny bit where, Marilyn says, oh, Maude, I bought you a box of candy that I was going to initially give to my mother. Can you make it out on the card? Mm-hmm. And Maude's looking at the card, and instead of seeing Maude, it's like Maude over the word mother.
Right.
So Maude's like, well, I can make out a little bit of the E and part of the T.
Right.
And she's like, but that's not the point. Mm-hmm. And at this point, it's a very physical comedy bit right now, where Carol is upstairs. Right. Maude is trying to avoid Carol seeing Marilyn. So Maude is like, Marilyn, if we're going to talk, I would like for us to talk in the kitchen.
Yes, so she drags Marilyn into the kitchen.
And
Marilyn is like, he says, something's bothering you.
Yes. And, Maude's like, what I want to talk to you, Marilyn, is about divorce. And Marilyn's like, oh, Maude, you're getting another divorce. Oh, Maude, you're a born loser.
Yes.
And Maude's like, Marilyn, you are a saint and an angel.
Yes.
But you are beginning to get on my nerves.
And I think that's when she wants to know if Marilyn and Harold are getting a divorce.
And Marilyn says, well, I was thinking of giving him one, but he's been running around with some floozy.
A floozy.
You've called me a floozy once or thrice.
Absolutely. All the time. All my best friends are floozies. What are you talking about? That's a compliment. If I call you a floozy, you should be honored.
I am every time, and that's when I call you short.
Mm-hmm. No, usually you say, and incidentally, you look fat. I do say that, actually. So at that point, we find out that Marilyn is aware that Harold is sleeping around, sleeping with somebody else. And, Maude is now terrified because she knows it's Carol. Yes.
But Maude is trying to, backtalk and...
Well, she's trying to, say, well,
not backtalk. She's, stumbling and fumbling over her words.
Yes, because, first of all, she doesn't like, Carol being thought of as a floozy.
Yes.
And it's saying, just because she's, seeing Harold, it doesn't mean she's a floozy.
And Maude's like, Marilyn's like, Maude, you're covering up.
Yes.
Maude says, on my honor, Marilyn, I you're just stuttering all the words out. And Marilyn's like, Maude, you're the floozy. Oh, to think of Maude as a floozy.
Yes.
That does tickle.
And Maude is insistent. She's like, I am not having an affair with Harold.
And, Marilyn at that point is like, there's nothing wrong with it. I just, hey, here, have a piece of my mother's candy.
Right.
Because obviously Marilyn is very crestfallen that Maude is having an affair with, quote unquote, having an affair with her husband.
So I think Maude tries to now shuffle Marilyn out the door again because she tells her she's expecting 55 for dinner and has to peel shrimp.
55 for dinner and I have to peel the shrimp.
Yes.
So at that point, Marilyn and Maude are at the door. Maude opens the door and who should be on the other side but Harold.
Yes.
And they have this really adorable Mickey Mouse Katir sound off where Harold says Marilyn, Marilyn says Harold, and Maude says darling.
Yes.
So she slams the door in Harold's face, turns to Marilyn, and Marilyn's like, but Maude! And Maude says, yes, Marilyn, it's true.
Yes.
Because obviously Maude is now covering up for Carol.
Right.
Again, a lot of beautiful, beautiful physical comedy in this.
Yes.
And of course, as Marilyn is being shuffled to the kitchen to obviously go out the back door, Carol comes downstairs.
Right.
So Carol says, Carol like shouts out, Marilyn!
Right.
Harold, I think, comes back into the house.
Yes.
And I think, how the hell did it go?
It was quite...
It was very, very, very
all
chaotic.
over the place.
It was very chaotic. So Carol says, Harold, Marilyn!
Yes.
Then I think either Harold or Marilyn says Carol, and then Maude says Ted and Alice, and I wish I was dead.
Yes.
That was a movie.
Yes. Bob and Ted and Carol
Bob, Ted, Carol, and Alice, and I wish I was dead.
Well, no, there was no I wish I was dead.
Wasn't there?
No.
Oh, oh, you're right. I'm wrong.
The movie was just Bob and Carol.
It was a play.
Probably, yeah.
I think it started as a play, and then it became
about
a
a couple
movie.
that decide to be swingers.
Yep.
Two couples.
Two couples that decide to be swingers.
Yes.
But yes, Ted and Alice, and I wish Carol, Ted and Alice, and I wish I was dead.
I wish I was dead. And Carol says to Marilyn, she's sorry that this had to happen.
And Marilyn says, "Oh, good grief, she's the one.
She's the floozy." Yeah. And I think
it gets a little hairy.
Yeah.
A little chaotic because like now everyone's jumping over. It was very, very fast paced. This episode reminded me a lot of My Gal Friday with Cary Grant and Roz Russell, which was it's a 3-hour play, but they squished it into an hour and a half movie.
Of course they did.
But there's a very specific reason why they did that. A lot of their lines were constantly being jumped over.
Oh.
And that was intentional because they wanted it squished, but they also wanted it fast-paced, especially for some of the jokes.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And that's how this episode felt. It felt like everyone was jumping over each other's lines.
Right.
And
I know at one point Marilyn says to think that she's not going to blame Carol, that she's an innocent child.
Yes.
I have something about that.
Yes, there was definitely that. And we also find out that, Harold's been going to Marilyn's after he plays handball, or then plays handball with the guys.
Well, doesn't Maude, confront them? She's like,
yes. Are you getting a divorce or not?
And Harold says yes, and Marilyn says
no. And
that's when
Harold says no, and Marilyn says yes.
Yeah. And that's when Harold says, I thought we settled this Tuesday night.
Yep. And, Carol's like, Tuesday night? I thought you played handball
Tuesday nights.
And, that's when Marilyn says, yes. He comes over Tuesday nights and then leaves Wednesday morning
to go play handball.
To go play handball with the guys.
Yes, every Tuesday. And that's when
Carol really lays into Harold, saying, it takes you all night to discuss a divorce?
She says, you're cheating on me with your own wife.
I just love Marilyn's line. The way we discuss a divorce, yes. It takes all night.
It takes all night.
And, Maude says, every Tuesday night, Marilyn, you really are too nice.
Yes.
Which obviously is the recurring theme. Like, Marilyn is such a nice, good person. So nice.
So nice. So Harold is saying, he's insisting they're getting a divorce. And Marilyn says, I won't give you a divorce now.
And let you spoil this sweet, innocent child? Oh, Harold, I'm much too nice for that.
Yes. Yeah, so Harold and Marilyn leave and...
enjoy my mother's candy, Maude.
Marilyn tells Maude to enjoy mother's candy.
I think it was right after Carol ran off into the kitchen, saying, you cheated on me with your ex-wife, and I trusted you.
Right.
And she races off into the kitchen to obviously have a good cry.
Yeah.
And Marilyn, really went from being this sweet, gentle person to being very militant.
Yeah.
Like, Harold?
Yeah.
And, at that point, Harold just, walks off with his head between his legs. And they go to leave, and then that's when Marilyn turns to Maude saying, enjoy my mother's candy, Maude. And then they exit.
Yes.
And again, it was really one of those moments where I'm like, oh, so Marilyn does wear the pants in the relationship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, all that sweetness was really a disguise.
It's a disguise.
It was a disguise.
It's a facade.
Yes.
It's a facade. So they leave. There's a big applause.
And Mrs. Naugatuck comes in.
Yes. And she's like...
She's complaining.
Even with all the windows open, I still couldn't hear all the farting.
It's too quiet next door for me. and she was actually saying that to the plant.
Yes.
Yes.
I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the plant.
Mm-hmm. So Maude goes into the kitchen.
Yep. And Carol has water in her eyes.
Yes.
And, Carol's like...
She asks
Want
Maude,
some coffee?
She says coffee.
And, Maude's like, sure.
Sugar.
And I think Maude says...
One lump.
One lump.
Yes.
And, then she says, speaking of lumps, Carol, I have one in my throat. And Carol again looks up to her misty-eyed saying, so do I.
Yeah.
And, Carol then crumbles into her mother's arms saying, oh, mother, thank you.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, Maude's not going to do the told you so dance.
Right.
Because she doesn't have to.
No, she doesn't have to. But also, Carol is, very crestfallen at this point.
Wouldn't you?
Of course.
I would.
Of course. Harold lied to her, used her.
Yes.
Cheated on her.
As relationships go, has there ever been a moment in your life where you were told not to date someone, but yet you continued doing it anyway?
Trying to think. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yes.
Same.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I mean,
sometimes
you're not one of them.
Sometimes you just have to
learn the mistakes on your own. Make the mistakes on your own.
There's
It's true. It's definitely true.
Sometimes. Now, interestingly enough, I just realized they never brought up Carol's fiance.
No, Chris is now an afterthought.
He's totally gone. We never found out what happened because they were engaged.
They were engaged.
They were engaged. He was the pediatrician.
Yep.
And they were supposed to get married. He was in a couple episodes.
He was in a couple episodes.
And they just wrote him out. And there was never
I don't even think it was a question of writing him out. You and I discussed this last week. And what I think happened was, and it's not even listed in trivia, but what I imagine happened was, it was I think it was Fred Grandy? Ted Grandy? Ted Grandy. Ted Grandy had a choice.
Fred Grandy?
Fred Grandy.
Fred Grandy.
I think it was Fred Grandy.
Fred Grandy.
He had a choice. He was either going to take a recurring character on the Love Boat, or he was going to become a permanent love interest with Carol.
Right.
But I think also they didn't want to write out Carol. Because obviously if they're going to have Chris be consistent on the show... Right. They're going to have to write out Carol. And I don't think they wanted to do that yet.
Well, also probably having her single
allowed more
story.
Allowed more story.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I guess is what they...
I'm just a little upset that they didn't do it. That they didn't I mean, what could they honestly have done? There really was nothing that they could have done. Right. And at that point, once Fred Grandy was now doing the Love Boat, they were now able to fully utilize a single Carol.
Right.
So, and they did. They utilized that a lot in incoming episodes. Mm-hmm. There was another episode, I think in season 4 or 5, where Carol is up for promotion, and she was hoping to be turned into an executive secretary, or an assistant to the president of the company, and instead she was just given a raise. And I'm almost positive they wouldn't have been able to do that had Chris been a permanent stay in the series.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense.
Because the plot goes, Carol is then going to try and get a rise out of the president of the company by dating him and accepting his advances because he is very attracted to Carol.
Okay.
But I think his name is Bob Lambert, but Bob is married to his wife.
Of course.
So again, you wouldn't be able to have that sort of storyline if Carol was in a relationship with Chris.
True.
So,
all right. So we bid adieu.
We bid adieu to Chris
and to Harold.
I think this is the last time we see both Harold and Marilyn.
And Marilyn.
But Carol has plenty of other dates that can be utilized. There's actually an episode where she dates a younger man.
Oh, interesting.
She dates a 21-year-old.
Oh.
And Carol at that point was my age. little bit younger. I think she was 31 or 32. 11.
Mm-hmm.
So 11 years. So 11 years older from 20. 31. So 32. Yeah,
well,
31, 32.
I'm the younger man in my relationship.
You are the younger man in your relationship. By 13 years. Good for you.
Good for me. I'm the trophy bride.
You're oh, that's why I love you. So, with that said, we thank you for listening to another episode of God Will Get You for That, Walter. If you would like to follow us, you can on everywhere podcasts are found.
Yes.
You can find us on YouTube and Instagram and YouTube and Facebook at God Will Get You for That, Walter, and Instagram at Findley's Friendly Appliances.
Yes.
If you would like to follow me, you can at That Tomcat, and that is cat with 2 T's. On all forms of social media and at thattomcat.com. Where could they find you?
Oh, they can find Toni Homeperm, and of course that's Toni
with an I.
With an I. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
We thank you so much for listening to God Will Get You for That, Walter, and you can hear us again on another episode of God Will Get You for That, Walter. Bye, guys.
Good night.